Okay. Let me see. Okay. Maybe if you, if you stop sharing for just 1 second, I want to stop sharing. The setting is. Still, because not to see me, but I'm actually in a village doing the project that I will be talking about. So suddenly on. Just checking everything's still good.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, can I share the screen now?
Okay. Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, now your video is visible.
I see. Okay. So maybe what the work I'm doing is going on over here. So in the middle of the presentation, I can show you how it actually works. So okay, great. We'll I'll stop it for now. Okay, and I'm ready whenever you are.
Yeah, we'll start now. So So thank you, everyone. Good evening to all the participants as well as the speaker, Professor Musfiq Mubarak. Thanks to Professor Am I audible?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. So thanks to Professor Musfiq Mubarak for agreeing to deliver the special lecture in our international workshop related to public policies in post-pandemic era. So Professor Musfiq Mubarak, at present he is a professor of economics at Yale University with concurrent appointments in the School of Management and also in the Department of Economics. Professor Mubarak is a founder and faculty director of the Yale Research Initiative on Innovation and Scale. And he also holds other appointments at Innovations for Poverty Action and International Growth Center at London School of Economics and also JPAL Lab at MIT. So he has been doing lots of work, mostly in the countries like Bangladesh, Nepal, Pakistan, and Sierra Leone. So at present, he is in Sierra Leone doing his field experiments. So thanks that he has taken lots of pain from the rural village in West Africa to join for this workshop. Thanks a lot. So from last 2 days, he has been communicating with me as well as the Rahul through WhatsApp, as well as the emails, so how he can join. He has tried his best to join from the rural village in West Africa. So he has published several papers, mostly in topmost economics journal like Econometrica, Science, American Economic Review, Review of Economic Studies. So now I would request Professor Mubarak to speak. The floor is yours, Professor Mubarak.
Okay, thank you very much, Chandrasekhar, and to IIT Tirupati for this kind invitation. And thank you also for accommodating my uncertainty. Until I actually got to this village today, I was not 100% sure whether or not I would have sufficient connection here. Thankfully, a friend who lives in Sierra Leone lent me a dongle for Orange Telecom, and that's working well. So thank you for joining. So I will do two things today. I will first talk about masks. So this work that started as a
So now you're not audible.
You can rejoin, Professor. You can log out and rejoin.
Yeah. Professor Mubarak, are you there?
Professor,
I think now he has to rejoin.
it's gone out, no?
Yeah. Yeah, just wait a few minutes. He has to rejoin since he is in somewhere in village in Africa, maybe some bandwidth issue. Sorry for the technical glitch. So, shall I participant date and I think they logged in. They just later some.
Okay. You can send me WhatsApp message to rejoin or something. Hope you're rejoining or something like that.
Yeah, let me see whether it's messaging.
we're expecting Professor Mubarak to rejoin. Kindly bear with us.
Hi, I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Now,
can.
now we are able to hear you.
Okay, yeah, I just turned off that Wi-Fi and I'm trying on like the mobile network. Okay, so let me speak fast because I realized that this was maybe too good to be true. So let me try to speak fast and get through it. So let's try to start talking about masks. If you can move to the next slide. And there may be some delay. So my apologies when there might be a little bit of a delay for me to see the slide. And okay, great. So now I can see the slide. Just an overview of the project is that early in the pandemic, the WHO, the CDC, et cetera, they weren't giving very clear guidance on whether masks should be promoted or not. And the reason is that there was ultimately we had to talk to the WHO chief scientist to get permission to do this project. And their concern was, number one, we don't really know if masks work. There's no randomized control trial based evidence that suggests that they, are effective during a pandemic. And what if they don't work, but people get a false sense of security, so we cannot really strongly promote it. And if they get a false sense of security, maybe they will start or stop being no work that are sensible, like things like, so you don't want that kind of very clear about their mask guidance, right? So then we said, okay, we will conduct that trial. So we did this large-scale randomized control trial in Bangladesh, all across rural Bangladesh, that covers, ultimately we collected data from 342,000 adults, and it covered 600 different villages all over the country. And it was a cluster randomized control trial. So the cluster means the entire community. So imagine every household in a village, plus the mosque that serves the community, everybody who comes to that mosque, the market that serves to that market, right? So in a community that's treated, everybody who's in this area gets access to masks and also some promotion activities. Okay? And then there are control group where we're not doing those activities that are physically distant from the treatment group. Okay, so and then what else did we do? Our trial was done in 2 stages. The first stage question is how itself difficult, that's true in India, in Bangladesh, in urban areas and rural areas, right? When people are used to not doing something, kind of get struggled for many, many years, how to get people to stop defecating in the open and start using improved sanitation. Just another example of behavior change. Okay, so that's the first stage. How do you change people? Does it improve the COVID situation? So does that reduce the COVID transmission rate? So for that second stage outcome, we actually conducted a seroprevalence survey, which means that for random samples of people, both in treatment and control areas, where treatment now mask wearing rate is up, control is lower, we collect their blood samples and test for COVID seropositivity. So do they have COVID antibodies? Okay, so next slide. There are 2 different kinds of masks. In some villages, surgical masks, and in other villages called cloth masks. And the reason we tested these 2 different types of masks is that there was true equipoise where our engineering data, in terms of the mask's filtration efficiency after we designed these masks, there were engineers from Stanford Medical School who were part of the team who did that work. So our engineering data suggested that the surgical masks have much higher filtration efficiency, but then when we talked to experts in Bangladesh, like at ICDDRB, International Center for Diarrheal Disease Research in the Ministry of Health, they thought that cloth masks were going to be more effective here because people think of surgical masks as a low quality product and they wouldn't wear it, right? So we thought, okay, then we should test both and put them in a horse race against each other. Okay, so now the final thing I want to say about this mask trial is that it was very large scale, and it had to be so large scale with 350,000 people, right? Is because if you want to understand the change in seroprevalence due to a change in mask wearing, right? You really, to get statistically precise enough estimates of that, you really need large samples because, the background rate of COVID at that time was quite low, right? So to see changes in a relatively rare outcome requires large samples. Okay. So now that we have such large samples, now that gave us an opportunity. That means that we were statistically overpowered for the first stage outcome on how to get people to wear masks, right? And so we used that to do something like a 16 to 20 arm trial instead of a 2-arm trial, right? So we threw many different strategies to get people to wear masks, and the strategies came from the fields of economics, marketing, psychology, right? So for example, psychologists tell us that if you get people to make a commitment, verbal commitment to do something, they're more likely to follow through. So we tried that. Then, in economics, there's talk of incentives. From the sanitation world, we learned that, there are sometimes you see success when you declare some villages open defecation free. Like that's the strategy that the government of India has used, right? So we're like, okay, let's try that with masks also. Maybe we can provide some village level incentives, right? Some kind of a prize, either monetary or non-monetary prize. So we tried everything. Okay, so what I have in this slide before you is that out of the 20 different things we tried, there were 4 strategies that really work if applied in conjunction with each other, if applied together. So those 4 strategies, we use the acronym NORM, N-O-R-M, to explain it because we think that it ends up changing social norms, and I'll show you why in a second. But what is NORM? So N is for free mass distribution. So we went door to door, distributed masks for free and for no cost, okay? And then when we distributed masks for free, we offered people information about masks. So in this case, as you can see in the middle of the picture, we provided video, so the video was the Prime Minister of the country, Sheikh Hasina, recorded a clip from us, the director of the Imam Training Academy in Dhaka, and religious leader recorded a clip. And then Shakib Al Hassan, which many of you will know, the best cricketer we have produced, he recorded a clip for us kindly. We got in touch with him through the coach. But I hear that he wasn't selected for the current round of the IPL. So I don't know what's going on. Maybe it'll be the program will be less effective if we do it now. So anyway, the R, so the M, let me explain, is like modeling by religious leaders and other leaders, political leaders. So what happened is that we cannot just distribute mass in house to house. You also need to do something at mosque because that's a dangerous place in that many people come together, they're standing shoulder to shoulder to pray. So it's a dangerous in terms of high transmission risk, right? So we want to make sure that everybody, when coming into the mosque, was wearing a mask, as well as like people who might be coming from other villages to use this mosque, right? That they were also had a mask, right? So we distributed there, and that gave us a chance to work with the imam and his team and make sure that they endorsed the concept and they understood why it was important. And in his khutbah, in his sermon, right, he included some information as to why it was important for everybody to do this. Okay. So the role modeling, so imam is just one example, like the union parishad chairman, I mean the local leader. So think about the equivalent of like panchayat leaders, right? In Bangladesh, we don't have panchayat. So they, they participated and endorsed the concept for us too. All right, and then we, because of this large sample size, we could do iterative experimentation. So we tried these three things first, and it turns out that the effects were not as high as we had hoped, right? There was increases in mask wearing, but it was not so large, and we needed a large enough effect to study the second stage of COVID transmission. So then we tried something extra. We added this reinforcement component, and that proved to be really critical because after we added this, our effect size tripled, okay? So what is reinforcement? So it's the idea that you cannot just like distribute masks one day in the village and leave. Okay, you got to go back to the village and sometimes remind people. Okay, so we hired, what you see in the picture, say a mask promoter. Okay, and that person's job was like walking around in the village. And if you see somebody not wearing a mask, he would politely intercept them and say, "Look, we distributed masks for in every house. So door to door, so we know you got one. So why don't you put your mask on, please?" Okay, and by the way, you can move to the next slide. And if they do not have the mask, then first we say, okay, can you please put it on? If they don't have it, please go back and get it. And if that was inconvenient, then here's a replacement mask in our hand that you can have, right? But please don't forget it next time. So it turns out that awkward conversation, right, where somebody is being intercepted and they're being told by someone to take the mask. And this is also why it was important to engage the leaders, because when some people got angry at us, well, who are you to tell me about masks? Then we say, no, it's not just us. Look, the chairman sub had said that, this is important for this village. So that's why we needed their endorsement as well, right? So once we do this, it seems like people wanted to just avoid this awkward conversation. And that's where we saw really large increases in mask wearing. Okay, so what was that large increase? So you see in the first couple of bars, right, that in the control group, about 13% of people wear their mask properly, covering nose and mouth. And in the treatment group, that jumped up to about 44%. Okay? And importantly, it wasn't just a one-time effect, right? So we continued passively observing and measuring this for 10 weeks, and mask wearing rate in the treatment group always stayed, 30 percentage points above the control group. So week after week after week, including a period after we left the village, right? So we did our interventions for a few weeks, reinforcement for a few weeks, we left the village, but we continued monitoring, and mask usage remained high. And that's why we kind of got excited about this and tried to promote masks, because this strategy of NORM, those four things together, seems to persistently increase mask use. Okay, and then the other two bars is where I'm showing you the second stage outcome, the COVID outcome. So what happens is that this change in mask wearing going from 13 to 44, right? That produces about an 11% reduction in COVID symptoms, like WHO defined COVID symptoms. And in our blood samples, the seropositivity, you see that it reduces actual COVID rates. And you can move to the next slide. It reduces COVID rates by 9.5%. Okay, so note that these decreases in COVID rates is coming from about a 30 percentage point increase in mask wearing, right? So this is not going from 0 to 100; it's going from 12 to 45, and that's what produces these effects, right? And then the other thing we do that I didn't show you on the slide is we look at the data separately by age group. And we see the effect size is largest among the elderly, right? So among the elderly, when we collected their blood samples, the treatment that I just described eliminated about 1/3 of all the infections, right? And so that was useful. That was important for us because we know that COVID is particularly dangerous for the elderly. Okay, so after we so then, we published this in a scientific journal, but even before we published the paper in the scientific journal, and then we were trying to do some advocacy via the media. So thankfully, Washington Post, New York Times, The Economist, The Atlantic Monthly, like all the British, American, and worldwide press picked it up, and that like advanced our cause because it allowed us to, go to policymakers with some baseline level of knowledge about the study already. And so you can move to the next slide. So we started doing, even before all the results were ready, we started doing some really hard-nosed advocacy, right, with governments in, we started in Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, Nepal, because those are the countries where I had connections. And, of course, I'm from Bangladesh and lived in India for 4 years of my life and have done research in all these countries. So in India, we tried working through government as well as through NGOs. So SEVA, so Self-Employed Women's Association, who started out in Ahmedabad, but they now work across Gujarat, Rajasthan, and a few other states. So they, Miss Rima Nanavati, who's the CEO of SEVA, so she was really excited about the results, and she's like, yes, we can use our association members to make masks and distribute them, right? And use this particular strategy. So we provided technical support and we also sent. So we were getting masks made cheaply in Bangladesh. So we shipped over about 2 or 3 million masks to Seva in Gujarat that they distributed in Gujarat and Rajasthan. And then in Bangladesh, we work through BRAC, which is the world's largest NGO and a very capable NGO. And so we went to the Ministry of Health, and they gave us the responsibility for our NORM team and BRAC to cover about half the districts in the country that had the higher COVID positivity rate. So BRAC is an impressive organization. They almost work like a parallel government. They have offices in all the districts, and they very effectively, distributed masks. And something that happened in the meantime is Hanes, US, the t-shirt company. So they had lots of masks that they had made, but ultimately, as COVID rates went down, the masks were not going to be used in the US. So they donated 110 million masks to us, and we shipped them over to Pakistan and to Bangladesh. So we shipped about 60, 70 million to Bangladesh and about 35 million to Pakistan. And the Lahore city government and then Punjab government, they've been distributing these masks. Okay, so we can move to the next slide. But this is not all easy in that we also had lots of failures. I just talked about some of the successes, but there were lots of important failures. So, for example, we tried working through the Gujarat government, the Telangana government, right? And we made very limited progress. Ultimately, what happened was, masks either weren't a priority or that there was no funding available to procure the masks, right? But then again, in Bihar, through Jivika, which is a semi-government organization, they've been implementing the NORM program. In West Bengal, we implemented through an NGO in small scale, and the government also had a hand in it, the West Bengal state government. And then the other thing we tried to do in parallel is to have some impact through the international organization. So then the new guidelines that came out of CDC and WHO, you can actually move to the next slide. So these guidelines, cited our study and they updated. Okay, so now what I want to talk about next is what I'm here in Sierra Leone doing, which is, okay, masks were important, but right now, the thing that we have to work on, and you can move to the next slide, is widespread vaccination. Right? And so we are continuing some randomized control trials on masks in Bangladesh during the Omicron period. But we're also running some randomized control trials. You can move to the next slide in Bihar, in India, in Punjab, in Pakistan, and in Sierra Leone, in rural areas, to improve vaccinations. Okay. So for that, we need to develop some theory, try to answer this question: why exactly are vaccination rates lagging, and therefore what type of intervention is required? You can move to the next slide. So here, there's 3 theories. So theory number 1 that you see in the slide in front of you is that, look, there was like a massive demand shock all over the world, and poor countries, I don't think India is a good example of this because India can produce its own vaccine, but many poor countries in Africa, Asia, right, were not getting preferential access to these vaccines. So one is they had lower payment capacity, and the other countries that were, the richer countries of the world, they put in a lot of orders first, right? And so poor countries weren't getting access. So one is, you can move to the next slide. So number 1 is an international supply chain failure. And the second theory is that maybe there's a claim that people in poor countries are hesitant, right, to take vaccines. Like the country I'm in right now, Sierra Leone. You know, the claim is, look, if we vaccines, it's a waste because people are so hesitant that they don't accept them, and so they expire and they don't get used, so that it gets wasted. Okay. The left side is a study published in the journal Nature Medicine, where to answer this question systematically, we collected data on vaccine hesitancy and acceptance across 15 countries. So 13 of them low and middle income countries, including like Nepal, Pakistan, right, and Sierra Leone, Rwanda, Colombia, so lots of countries in the global south. But we also had as comparison points United States and Russia. And you can move to the next slide. Okay. And what we learned from this study is that, in fact, the vaccination acceptance in countries like Sierra Leone, right? Every single low and middle income country we studied, in every single country, the vaccine acceptance was much better. Vaccine was much better than it is in the US, and definitely much better compared to Russia. Okay, and so this idea that people are vaccine hesitant, that just doesn't seem to be correct, right? But here's a picture from Sierra Leone. Like, this is actually the area where I am right now. So the problem is that trying to get vaccines to people, you know, for them to come and take vaccines, that's very, very difficult. Okay. So, you know, like, there aren't all-weather roads, right? And people live quite far away, so it takes 3 hours each way. So we collected data on this at baseline, and we see on average it takes 3 hours to get to the nearest vaccination clinic each way. Costs $6.50 in a country where majority of people are living at less than $1.50 a day, right? So it's not that they're hesitant. It's not a psychological issue here. It's that access is so difficult, right? They're willing to take vaccines, but not if it costs them so much. Okay? So that's why I think access is the problem to solve. It appears to be hesitancy, but it's not. Okay, we can move to the next slide. And to address the access problem, we had to come up with a strategy. So we are now working with the Ministry of Health here, along with another NGO called Concern Worldwide. And we're trying to answer the question, is improving access sufficient to get large increases in vaccination rates? Okay. And second, you know, beyond just bringing vaccines, you know, can we also do some social mobilization to prepare the communities that the vaccines are arriving? And does that make our strategy even more cost effective by getting more and more people to show up all at once? Okay, so in the top two pictures here, you see what we mean by improving access, right? So given that cars have a hard time traveling to these communities, we actually, you know, because of road conditions, etc., we put vaccines in a cooler box. You can see in the back of a motorbike, the green cooler, right? That's where the vaccines get kept. And then you see on the motorbike, there are two ladies who are in the back of the bike. So those are nurses, so they can administer the vaccines. The idea is to just get vaccines to the people. But for their visit to be effective and efficient, time efficient, right? It's okay. Somebody's playing soccer in front of me. You know, in order to make that efficient, so we basically do a meeting, like you see in the middle pictures, right? Meeting of the community, introducing them to the concept, why vaccination is important, right? And then also you see the man with the mic, so he's kind of a local leader, and having him talk to everybody about why it's important to get vaccinated, right? And then once you do that, then in the bottom pictures, you see if people show up all at once, then it's very efficiently and quickly you can get lots of people vaccinated. Okay? So that's, we can move to the next slide. I'm just waiting for the slide to update on my end. So the research design is this two-pronged research design. So there's a set of control areas, and there's a set of areas where we provide access, so this last mile delivery, which I think is a big problem. And then a set of areas where we do some additional social mobilization beyond like the village meeting, right? And that social mobilization is actually knocking on people's doors, right? Going door to door and encouraging them to show up the day that the vaccine arrives. Okay, so why is that useful to see? Of course, each of these things is costly, so we want to see how far we can get with just solving the last mile delivery problem? And then are we able to like cost effectively get more people vaccinated quickly if we can bring this extra social mobilization in. Okay, so now what I'd like to do is maybe we can stop sharing the screen since I happen to be in the field. I can, if you stop sharing the screen, I can turn on my video, turn it around, and show you what these communities actually look like. Right. So this is my friend Malcolm here. Salam alaikum, Malcolm. So he's actually listened to the whole presentation, and I hope you're going to grow up and work on health. Right. Thanks very much. So these are, communities are quite remote and rural. So basically from Freetown, the capital of the country, it took us over 4 hours to get here today, right? So now we had a meeting. The picture that I was showing you actually happened exactly under this tree. And the first day in this particular community, we came in with Ministry of Health officials, right? And they come from a nearby town called Port Local, and that's now the nearest vaccination center. So something that's happened over the last couple of months that's really valuable is that there are now many more vaccination centers. So vaccines have gotten closer to people. But still, like even though we had a nice car to drive over these roads, right? It took us like 2 hours, maybe 1.5 hours to get from the nearest vaccination center in Port Loco to this community. This name of this this community is like you go through like really tiny roads. It's by a river that you can see here, right? And so it was it takes and the cost it takes to get the vaccines to people. It's really expensive and difficult for them to get it, right? And that's why it's important for us to just bring vaccines to the people. I think that will get us a large part of the way towards getting more people vaccinated cost effectively. Yeah? What else can I tell you? Maybe I should just stop here and take questions.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Mubarak, for the nice talk, for nice presentation. So now it is open for the question and answer. So Q&A. So please raise your hand if you have any question. Kindly raise your hand. Yeah. So Rahul Shiroi, please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, I can hear you.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for that really interesting talk. And the drama of it all, that you're actually out there in the field, really adds to the entire presentation. So it's super exciting more than anything else. So I mean, my question was sort of more general. So here you are working in and then when you go back into the US, you also, I mean, this is the news at least we've been hearing. Things are so political that the choice about wearing a mask and not wearing a mask does not seem to be just about knowing what's right or knowing having adequate knowledge. It's just so much more emotional, so much more political. Why do you think that is the case? And what implications does this have for the kind of interventions that you are making here in the field?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let me tell you about like a funny interaction I just had with my colleagues who are here with me in Sierra Leone. So we were doing. I wish I could show you the video. I took a video of this. So the village councillor, kind of like the acting head of the village right now. So he did a very nice speech where he was talking about the importance of vaccination and that he actually went to town and got it, but it cost him 100,000 leones, so the equivalent of about $10, okay, to go get vaccinated. And he was telling all of his village members that, look, these guys are coming here, doing us a favor, and they're bringing it, and it's going to be here for free, and I actually have to go and spend 100,000, right? So it was perfect. It was a perfect, introduction for us So he did a nice job for us. And then, I was joking to my collaborator here, my co-author here, that isn't it strange that we are talking about like vaccination, and then the Ministry of Health official was explaining the science of vaccinations, okay? And why it's important, like talking about the Ebola crisis that they had here in the past, right? Reminding people of that, right? And I was joking, like, isn't it strange that nobody is putting up their hand and saying, wait, I saw on Facebook that the vaccinations are actually Bill Gates trying to implant a chip. So the thing is that it is, so when people have Facebook and WhatsApp, right, they have lots of different kinds of ideas, but somehow in rural Sierra Leone, that's not the concern. Here people are sensible, like, and I think part of it is that look, for those of us, like I grew up in Bangladesh, right? For those of us who grew up in countries where there was polio, where there was measles, right? And we lived through it, and we have institutional memory. My parents lived through all of that, right? So we are not going to question vaccinations and question science, right? Only when you have the privilege of living in a country where you no longer, you no longer have to worry about these things, you can become complacent and then start having all sorts of freedom and political beliefs, right? And yeah, I think it is quite, I mean, you're right. The problem is very different in the US. And okay, so let me, I'm talking, but you just reminded me of some idiotic interactions I had. So after we did the mask study in Bangladesh, okay, and the study gets covered, I remember as soon as the Washington Post and New York Times covers it, like then it became a big brouhaha over here with people attacking us. Okay? And we got attacked both from the left and the right. Okay, the right wing attacks were, oh, masks clearly don't work, they're just misinterpreting the data, right? And they had, they basically started claiming, oh, this study shows masks don't work, right? It was an insane interpretation of our data, but whatever, okay? But on the left, people are like, oh, we already knew masks work, right? So why are people going and, why are these Americans going and torturing Bangladeshis to prove something we already know, right? Like, America doesn't need this. I'm like, look, man, I'm not doing it for America. Like, not everything is about you. I'm from Bangladesh. We need to understand how to get people to wear masks in rural Bangladesh, and that's why we're doing it, right? So I just kind of try to shut down the politics out of it, because it turns out the people I need to talk to is not the people in my neighborhood, not all these pundits in the US. The people I really needed to convince is BRAC and the Ministry of Health in Bangladesh, so that they actually put the effort in to distribute masks.
So can I ask?
Sorry, that was a long-winded answer, but yeah, sometimes I'm getting a little bit too emotional about this, maybe. Sorry.
No, thank you very much.
So I have two questions. So can I ask? I'm audible?
Yes, please. Yes.
Yeah, okay. So one thing regarding the wearing the mask. So during the first wave, between the first wave and second wave, in India, I observed that the first wave mostly ends with the month of September 2020. And we got the second wave mostly in the March end or April first week. Okay, during the September and September 2020 to mostly the April 2021, suppose I go to the market, I see hardly anyone wearing mask. Okay, but so now the second wave ends mostly in July, August 2021. Okay, so now we encounter third wave mostly the last month, but I still see that during the second wave and third wave, the most of the people are wearing masks. But say first wave and second wave, between the first wave and second wave, I'm observing that okay, less number of people wearing the mask as I go to the market. But between the second wave and third wave, the most of the around the little bit more number of people are wearing the mask in the urban area which I'm living. Okay, so I went to rural village in my own village in month of October 2021. So I have observed that so hardly anyone wearing mask except myself. Okay, hardly anyone wearing the mask in my village. Okay, so I will explain this, because why people are not wearing the mask? They know the risk of being infected, and most of the people are infected in the wave 2, and the mortality rate was more high. So that's about the vaccination, about the wearing the mask. And second thing, I'll come to the vaccination. So when the government of India started the vaccination in January 2021, it was initially for the health workers.
Let me, because the first question was already a very good one and long one, so let me try and answer that briefly, and
Yeah,
then
sure.
I'll forget otherwise. Okay, and then I'll
Okay.
ask you for the second. So yeah, you're right. I think the main thing that I'll say a few things in response to your comment, but the main thing I want to convey to all of you is that getting people to wear masks and then keeping that as a habit, this is very fragile. This is not easy to do, right? Even for us, you know, like at some point we're going to get sick of wearing masks. But, I find myself, you know, having to remind myself to wear masks. So, you know, like the norm strategy I'm talking about, it's not magical in that you do really need to put a lot of effort into it. You need to reinforce, you need to remind people to keep them continuing that behavior. It's not something that I can say, look, once you do it, it's not like a vaccine where you just put in a needle and you're done, right? Behavior, you know, consistent behavior change is very difficult like that. So we have to, like, if mask wearing becomes important because of the background COVID situation or any other respiratory disease situation, I think it requires active involvement by the community, the government, NGOs, right? People who are going to have to distribute masks, remind people, etc. Right? And as to why it goes up and down, right? A couple of factors to remember is, okay, here are the factors. So once people get vaccinated, right, they might feel more protected and less likely to put on masks. Okay, so vaccination and mask can you know, sometimes in people's mind it can be substitutes, right? For good reason. Another thing is that you know, the background rate of COVID, right? Like that's like whether COVID is all around you. If you feel like, oh, that's what you're hearing in the news all the time or not, right? That's going to affect mask wearing rate. And third, you know, the pronouncements by the leadership, right? That's going to also have an effect on mask wearing. So I think like one of the mistakes that came from India that led to the big crisis, the massive crisis that we were all shocked about, that happened in April 2021, was like soon before that happened, you know, the government making pronouncements that, oh, we have defeated COVID, the pandemic is over here. That was a big mistake, right? Because like for a whole year or more, people had stopped all their social activities, no weddings, etc. And then suddenly, if a message comes from the top that we've done it, we've defeated it, right? When of course the virus hadn't gone away, right? So that's another reason why like people stop doing sensible things like distancing, like mask wearing, etc. Those are all the factors I think that always play into it, and might explain the volatility in mask wearing that you have observed. Okay, so and what was your second question?
Yeah. So second question is that I do agree with you that the reluctance of taking the vaccine across the countries, so which we are showing in Bangladesh, in India, as well as Nepal, as well as Syria, Lebanon. Okay, so in India, so what I have observed, so Indian government has started the vaccination program from the January 2021. So initially they have given the option that okay, health workers are compulsory, and those are basically age 60 plus, they should take the vaccine, and they simultaneously added those are basically 45 plus having the comorbidity. January, February, March, in April we have encountered the second wave. So I have mother which is old, around 80 plus, okay, close to 80. So during that time I also checking in mobile that okay, the slots, okay, I can take my mother for the vaccination. So used to get slot. Anyway, I have not taken my mother for vaccination during that time, and I used to get the slot. Okay, but people are not going to the place to get the vaccine. Okay, I used to easily to get the slot, but after April, okay, when the second wave hit, okay, in the month of May, it was very difficult to get a slot for the vaccination. See, during the January, February, March, slots are available. No one is going to take the vaccine. In the month of May, June, July, no slots are available. Whatever the vaccine comes, there's a huge queue to take the vaccine. Okay, so how you define this? So when the vaccines are available and people are not reluctant to take the vaccine, when there's a second wave came and there's outcry that the mortality rate is high, immediately people are jumped that okay, we need vaccine.
Yeah, so there are two factors I'll point to. One is something I kind of already mentioned in your in response to your question about masks, which is you know, whether people are going to engage in preventative behavior depends a lot on how real they feel the risk is, right? And one big difference that happened, you know, between January 2021 and May 2021 in India was this massive, you know, spike in COVID rates that captured the entire world's attention, right? The entire world's attention was on India, where it looked like, there was like a massive breakdown of the healthcare system, right? And so if that's going to be in everybody's mind, you can imagine that demand for vaccines go up, right? But the second thing, so that's a demand side explanation. But there's also, like, by working with the government of Bihar, we noted that there was also a very impressive actions taken by government in order to get mass vaccination rates. Okay, so basically, we were doing this. The reason why I'm much more involved in the project in Sierra Leone now, we started that project, similar kind of project in rural Bihar, right? But what we learned was, as we were even collecting data, like baseline data, to try and launch the project, just like from week to week, from month to month, the vaccination situation in Bihar was changing very rapidly, where like first doses, everybody got it, right? And then we're like, okay, we'll focus our project on trying to get second doses in. And it turns out, by the time we are ready to launch in the field because of various delays, oh yeah, look, now even second doses, we're quite a ways in, right? So I think there was both the demand that shifted because of the crisis, and supply had shifted because the Indian government started taking this very, very seriously after going through that massive wave in April 2021.
Okay, so thank you. So there is another, someone raised the hand. Mona Lisa, please go ahead and ask.
Yes, sir. Sir, this is a very general question. When this corona thing came, we were introduced to this new thing, wearing masks, sanitizing hands. It was completely unusual to us. So behavioral economists suggested, if we can make this a habit, then we can continue this for a longer time. And we can see the corona, it's been 3 years, but still wearing mask is not a habit for most of the people. So what is your view on this? Are still people valuing their comfort over their life?
Yeah. I agree. I don't think. Okay, so there are. So let me start with since it's a general question, I'll start with a very general answer on behavior change, the psychology, economics of it. Okay? So the general answer is that if you want persistent behavior change, by persistence I mean, there could be an initial stage where you're really pushing it. You can provide people incentives, you can remind them, you do something for them, and as in response to that, they put a mask on. Like, for example, you can penalize them and say that, look, I'm going to fine you if you don't have your mask on, or I'm going to not allow you to enter in this place that you need to go to if you don't have your mask on. So you penalize them and they put their mask on. Okay. And then where does persistence come from? It can come from two sources. So one that you already mentioned is habit, right? Which is that, it became a habit. So for example, if, you might think in sanitation, if I can just get people to switch from open defecation to using a toilet, at some point it becomes a habit. After that, you don't need to tell them anymore. They just start using the toilet because that's what they're used to, right?
Yes.
Or brushing your teeth, right, with toothpaste. It becomes a habit. It's not like every morning you and I wake up and think about, should I brush my teeth? Is that economically sensible? No, it's just our habit. We just brush our teeth, right? So that's one, that's one possibility of persistent habit. The other possibility of persistence, which I'm going to focus on more, is changes in social norms, right? I think in the case of masks, that's a much more important mechanism to generate persistence than internal habits. And the reason is that we are wearing masks to protect each other. There's lots of health externalities from us not wearing a mask because, the virus transmits from one person to another, which is the definition of an externality. Okay? So then what happens is that, again, so this way I'll tell the story is in, say, February of 2020, right? Just or March of 2020, when, coronavirus was around, right? But it hadn't become such a big deal yet. So where I live in Connecticut in USA, like if I wore a mask in February of 2020, people would look at me funny. Like, what's wrong with this person? Maybe they have a disease and maybe I should avoid them. Like, this is a really weird behavior that they're wearing a mask. Okay. And in February of 2021, if I went out in the same neighborhood in front of the same people, if I went out not wearing a mask, right, they would have that reaction. Oh, what a weird person. Why is that person not wearing a mask? What's wrong with them? Right? Mm-hmm. So that's a case where social norms change so much that it's like, even if I did not want to wear a mask, I had no option but to wear one, because otherwise I would become socially ostracized, right? Okay. So I think the important, I would say, if you want to generate the kind of persistence that you're talking about, instead of pursuing like habit-based changes, I would be pursuing like social norm-based changes. And that's also why we were trying to focus on the NORM, right? That we want to help everybody understand that your behavior is affecting everybody else. Everybody knows this, and therefore you should change your behavior.
Okay, so thank you so much, sir.
So, any other question? Anyone? Please raise your hand. Anyone? So if there is no question, I'd like to ask the last question from my side. So still the pandemic is continuing.
Listener here, my friend.
Am I audible?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. Still the pandemic is continuing. Because of the pandemic, both the state as well as the national government putting their SOP regarding the different kinds of the shops are closed or what time you open the shops in the rural areas. So because of pandemic, the rural economy, the consumption expenditure or the people made the expenditure or the income of the rural households is basically coming down. Okay, it's basically badly affected. From the World Bank data, from the India World Bank data, so it shows that the income of the rural households are badly affected, and it leads to many other problems like psychological suicide or other mental stress. Many other issues are happening. So is there any way to end this? Suppose we end the pandemic, end the pandemic and let it happen, and people start live their as usual business as usual scenario, or that which is more costly. I'm not sure that now continue with this pandemic and there's another cost we're putting on the rural villages, or we'll stop it and we'll move to another scenario that could be possible to continue the COVID-19 cases, but the income will increase also, because now there's a badly affected the rural households in India.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's an excellent point. That's been a source of concern from day one for us, right? So here, I will answer your question, but like if you are really interested, and if the audience is, I'll point to a few things I've written about this. So in Foreign Policy magazine, if you go to my website and look under media and just search for the word foreign policy, you'll see back in April of 2020, just as the pandemic started, I did some modeling and of like epidemiological modeling, adding developing country data from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, etc., and wrote an article with the title "Poor Countries Need to Think Twice About Social Distancing." Okay? That's one. And then another article I wrote in Foreign Policy magazine exactly a year later, right, was about what rich countries should do, and that article is titled "Saving Lives, Save Livelihoods." So I think the answer that you're looking for is very dependent on like whether the country is rich or poor, what the social support system, like the social insurance system looks like. Is it easy for us to protect poor people's livelihoods, right? And so okay, so let me tell you a couple of insights that come out of that thinking, and of course we have to look to the future. So that's also should be part of my answer. So when the pandemic started, what happened was, we were all social distancing in like US, UK, and that's what BBC, New York Times, and CNN, everybody was covering, right? And in response to that, like poor countries, they had no choice but to say, oh, that's what the state-of-the-art response is. We have to just copy it, right? So you'll remember early on in April of 2020, when the Indian government imposed a lockdown, right? How much hardship that caused, because I thought that was not very well thought through, right? Like you have to really understand the nature of the economy, where the migrant workers are, where the informal sector is, like what will their livelihood option be if they no longer have jobs, if their employers don't allow them to come into the home, right? So there's a big cost imposed through the response to the pandemic, but not if not the virus itself, right? And we need to think about that carefully. And it turns out what our modeling showed is that when you put instead of calibrating the epidemiological models to the UK data that was being used to design policy in US and UK. Oh, thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Guess what? I get a coconut. Amazing. So, so instead of, if you calibrate it to like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh data, you end up getting a different answer. And one reason you get a different answer is that the age distribution of the population is very different. And so the virus is not as threatening to our populations in South Asia or in Africa as it is to like rich country population, right? Another reason, well, let me not get into any more detail. You can read the article, right? So let's, but then on the other hand, something we learned about rich countries is that for rich countries, I think the right strategy was like, you got to crush the virus because you have the social insurance system to protect livelihoods and make sure people are not going hungry, right? So just crush the virus and then open back up, right? So then you end up seeing that Australia and New Zealand ended up doing a lot better than say US, where economic activity remained low for months and months and months and months because we never were able to crush the virus. We never got our country under full lockdown, right, in the US. Okay? So you end up getting very different answers for rich and poor countries. Now looking forward, now we have to think about, okay, what's the right strategy for us now? Okay. So the problems I see, right, one is that this pandemic already will have produced some persistent effects. So one thing is that if schools have been shut down for like 18 months, like they have been in Bangladesh, right, that's going to have some effect on kids' learning outcomes, obviously, right? It's going to have an effect on their future productivity, and we need to figure out ways to address those deficiencies that have been created, right? I know in Tamil Nadu, they're doing some really interesting work. So a friend of mine, Karthik Muralidharan and Abhijit Singh, they're doing some work with the Tamil Nadu government on using technology, right, to try and address the learning gaps, right? So that's one issue we have to address. Another issue we have to address is that there was a lot of interruptions on regular healthcare access, right? So regular immunizations, they have been missed, right? So you don't want to start a different pandemic of measles just because people haven't been taking their immunization, right? So we have to look at that. And third, we have to continue thinking about like the economic hardship, and can we use, so in India, you have the Jan Dhan accounts, Aadhaar system, right, as a way to provide some social support. And can we use like direct benefit transfers like this in order to protect people's livelihoods, right, going forward? So I think, right now is the time for us to start thinking systematically about the long-term consequences, economic consequences of this pandemic, and start paying systematic attention to it. We've been so busy just putting out fires, right, that we haven't yet had a time to think systematically about like, what are we going to do in the long run?
So, okay, thank you. Thanks a lot for giving the time for this lecture, and also given all the uncertainty, finally you made it. So thanks a lot. I would like to thank you on behalf of the IIT and it's a Humanity and Social Science Department for making it. I also like to thank all our participants to attend the section, also ask the questions. So I'd like to mention here that we are launching a new program from the next academic year, that is Master in Public Policy. So if you're in India sometime, please let us know. We'd love to have you here for a few days or few months. We'll love to have you here. So please let us know if you are visiting anytime India. Okay. So by this note,
okay, thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation.
So I'll end the meeting here. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry I interrupted. There was a little bit of a lag. No, thank you for this invitation, for the excellent questions and for the engagement. And yeah, India is always close to my heart. I spent 4 of the best years of my life there. I was going to school in Tamil Nadu, and I'd love to meet in person sometime. And IIT is world renowned as one of the best engineering and technical institutes in the entire world. And we're always, for example, seeing applications from IIT students to our PhD programs. It's a very impressive set of students and faculty. And I'd love to engage.
So we are living around 130 kilometers away from the Chennai, Tamil Nadu. We are very close to Tamil Nadu.
Okay.
So 130 kilometers.
Great.
So thank you a lot.
Are you in Andhra Pradesh?
Yeah, it's not audible.
Are you located in Andhra Pradesh?
Yeah, we are in Andhra Pradesh.
Okay. Okay.
We are in Andhra Pradesh. So we are 130 kilometers away from the Chennai.
Okay. Okay. All
We are
right.
very close.
Yes. Hopefully we will be continued.
Very close to Chennai, as well as 250 kilometers from Bangalore.
Okay.
Okay. So thanks a lot. Thank you. Thanks a lot. I'll just end the meeting here. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.